manor house is a large country house, which was historically the capital residence, a messuage within a manor, the basic unit of territorial organization in the feudal system in Europe, in which dwelled the lord of the manor. It formed the administrative center of a manor, and within its great hall were held the lord's manorial courts, communal meals with manorial tenants, and great banquets. The term is today loosely applied to smaller country houses, frequently dating from the late medieval era, which formerly housed the gentry. They were often fortified, but this was frequently intended more for show than for defense. Manor houses existed in most European countries where feudalism existed, where they were sometimes known as castles, palaces, and so on. Many buildings, such as schools, are named manor. The reason behind this is because the building was or is close to a manor house. Function. The lord of a manor may have held several such properties throughout a county, or even, for example in the case of a feudal baron, throughout a kingdom, which he occupied only on occasional visits. Even so, the business of the manor required to be directed and controlled by regular manorial courts, which appointed manorial officials such as the bailiff, granted copyhold leases to tenants, resolved disputes between manorial tenants, and administered justice in general. A large and suitable building was required within the manor for such purpose, generally in the form of a great hall, and a solar might be attached to form accommodation for the lord. Furthermore, the produce of a small manor might be insufficient to feed a lord and his large family for a full year, and thus he would spend only a few months at each manor and move on to another where stores had been laid up. This also gave the opportunity for the vacated manor house to be cleaned, especially important in the days of the cesspit, and repaired. Thus such non-resident lords needed to appoint a steward, a seneschal, to act as the deputy in such matters and to preside at the manorial courts of his different manorial properties. The day-to-day administration was carried out by a resident official in authority at each manor, who in England was called a bailiff or reeve. Architecture. Although not typically built with strong fortifications as were castles, many manor houses were fortified, which required a royal license to crenellate. They were often enclosed within walls or ditches, which often also included the agricultural buildings, arranged for defense against roaming bands of robbers and thieves. In days long before police, they were often surrounded by a moat with a drawbridge, and were equipped with gatehouses and watchtowers, but not, as for castles, with a keep. Large towers are lofty curtain walls designed to withstand a siege. The primary feature of the manor house was its great hall, to which subsidiary apartments were added as the lessening of feudal warfare permitted more peaceful domestic life. By the beginning of the 16th century, manor houses as well as small castles began to acquire the character and amenities of the residences of country gentlemen, and many defensive elements were dispensed with. For example, Sutton Place in Surrey, circa 1521. A late 16th century transformation produced many of the smaller Renaissance chateaux of France and the numerous country mansions of the Elizabethan and Jacobean styles in England. In Central Europe, Germany, the German equivalent of a manor house is a Gutshaus. Also Herrenhaus and Domain are common terms. Schloss is another German word for a building similar to manor house, stately home, chateau or palace. Other terms used in German are Burg, Festung and Palais, Palast. Gut Altenhof in Danischer Wold. Schloss Bodmer in Klutz. Gut Blommenberg in Salent. Gut Brodei in Ostholstein. Gut Emkendorf in Emkendorf. Essenrode Manor in Essenrode. Schloss Glucksburg on Angeln. Gut Knoop in Danischer Wold. Gut Krumbeck. Gut Panker in Ostholstein. Gut Progensdorf in Danischer Wold. Gutsalz, zu in Fargau Pragesu, Gutweilsdorf in Ottendorf, Gutwellingsbüttel, Gutwatersen in Herzogtum Lauenburg, Schloss Ahrensburg in Ahrensburg, Nutschau Priory in Travenbruck, Rittergut Kurbitz, Villa Haus in Hesse, Poland. The architectural form of the Polish manor house evolved around the late Polish Renaissance period and continued until the Second World War, which, together with the communist takeover of Poland, spelled the end of the nobility in Poland. A 1944 decree nationalized most mansions as property of the nobles, but few were adapted to other purposes. Many slowly fell into ruin over the next few decades. Poland inherited many German-style manor houses after parts of Eastern Germany were taken over by Poland after World War II. In Eastern Europe, Russia, Abramsyevo, Arkhangelskoye, Grebnevo, Kuskovo, Ligovo, Mimdor, Miranovo, Ostankino, Priory Palace, Ropsha, Rojdestvino, Sergeyevka, Strelna, Tarkany, Jasnaya Polyana, Yelagan Palace, Znamenka, in Great Britain and Ireland, Channel Islands, Saumarez Manor in Guernsey, Samares Manor in Jersey, Les Augres Manor, Jersey, Longville Manor, Jersey, St. Wens Manor, Jersey, Sark Manor, Sark, England. Before around 1600, larger houses were usually fortified, generally for true defensive purposes, but increasingly, as the kingdom became internally more peaceable after the Wars of the Roses, as a form of status symbol, reflecting the position of their owners as having been worthy to receive royal license to crenellate. The Tudor period of stability in England saw the building of the first of the unfortified great houses, for example Sutton Place in Surrey, circa 1521. The dissolution of the monasteries under King Henry VIII resulted in many former monastical properties being sold to the king's favourites, who then converted them into private country houses, examples being Woburn Abbey, Ford Abbey, Nostell Priory and many other mansions with the suffix Abbey Priory to the name. During the second half of the reign of Queen Elizabeth I and under her successor King James I, the first mansions designed by architects, not by mere masons or builders, began to make their appearance. Such houses as Burghley House, Longleat House, and Hatfield House are among the best known of this period and seem today to epitomize the English country house. Appellations and suffixes. The suffixes given to manor houses today have little substantive meaning, and many have changed over time. Thus a manor house may have been known as Heanton House in the 18th century and in the 19th century as Heanton Court, and later as Heanton, Satchville, Hall. The original suffix was simply Hall, added to the name of the manor, which reflected the reality of the simple but large building referred to. House. The suffix house is common for manor houses, from the grandest such as Chatsworth House to smaller ones, Chatsworth House, Burghley House, Farley House, Chavenage House, Halswell House, Hatfield House, Knowle House, Holly Tree House, Benfleet, Hestercombe House, Montacute House, Lessingham House. Court. Court was a suffix which came into use in the 16th century, and contemporary topographers felt the need to explain the term to the readers. Thus the Devonshire historian Tristram Risdon clarified the term at least 3 times in his main work, Survey of Devon. This now lord of these lands, Sir Robert Bassett, hath his dwelling at Eaton Court, in this parish, an adjunct importing a manor house in the Lord's Signory. This Nutwell Court, which signifies a mansion house in a signory, came to the family of Prideaux. And regarding the manor of Yarnscombe, the house is called Court, which implieth a manor house, or chief dwelling in a lordship. The biographer John Prince, in his Worthies of Devon, remarked as follows in his biography of John Hill, of Hill's Court in Exeter, Devon: "The word court annexed unto the name of the Lord may imply that Hill had a lordship here, and that the court of his manor, where the tenants were to pay the suit and service, was usually kept at this his mansion house. This is the reason why many gentlemen's seats in this county, and elsewhere, are distinguished by the title of court, or court-house, because the court of the manor was wont to be held there." The obvious origin of the suffix would appear to be that the building was the location where the manorial courts were held. Well-known examples of manor houses named with the suffix court are Hampton Court, later converted to a royal palace; Courton Court, Ashton Court, Barrington Court, Birtsmorton Court, Clevedon Court, Kemerton Court, Sutton Court, Ufton Court, Langton Court, Leckhampton Court. Palace. The suffix palace is very rarely used for a manor house which is not a royal residence. Blenheim Palace, which replaced the former nearby building of Woodstock Palace, a royal residence, and the manor house of the Manor of Woodstock. Bromley Palace, Wimbledon Palace, Castle. True castles, when not royal castles, were generally the residences of feudal barons, whose baronies comprised often several dozen other manors. The manor on which the castle was situated was termed the caput of the barony. Thus every true ancient defensive castle was also the manor house of its own manor. The suffix castle was also used to name certain manor houses, generally built as mock castles, but often as houses rebuilt on the site of a former true castle. Watermouth Castle, Castle Howard, not in the form of a castle; Mereworth Castle, not in the form of a castle; Iden Castle, Northumberland; Edlingham Castle, Kirby Muxloe Castle; Lambton Castle. True castles: Hever Castle, Kent; Scotney Castle, Summeris Castle, Somerton Castle, Stokesay Castle. Park. Nearly every large medieval manor house had its own deer park adjoining, emparked by royal license, which served primarily as a store of food in the form of venison. Within these licensed parks, deer could not be hunted by royalty, nor by neighboring landowners, nor by any other persons. During the 16th century, many lords of manors moved the residences from their ancient manor houses, often situated next to the parish church and near or in the village, and built a new manor house within the walls of their ancient deer parks adjoining. This gave them more privacy and space. The suffix park came into use in the 18th and 19th centuries, examples being Poundesford Park, Dereham Park, Cirencester Park, Hartham Park, Corsham, Rootham Park, Sandhill Park, Picton Park, Easton Park, Wimbledon Park. Place. The origin of the suffix place is believed to be a shortened form of palace, a term commonly used in Renaissance Italy to denote a residence of the nobility. Penshurst Place, Sutton Place, Hinksworth Place, Ickham Place, Simpson's Place, Prideaux Place, Cornwall. Tower. Towers. This is a rare 19th-century suffix for a manor house, a stately home. Within this category cannot be included mere surviving gatehouse towers from demolished ancient manor houses such as the 14th-century Borstal Tower, Lairmani Tower, c. 1520. Mentmore Towers. Manor. These houses, although mostly forming residences for the lords of the manors on which they were situated, were not historically named with the suffix manor, as were many had country houses built in the 19th century, such as Hughenden Manor or Waddesdon Manor. The usage is often a modern catch-all suffix for an old house on an estate. True manor are not double names. Manor houses employing double-barreled names generally have no suffix. Baddesley Clinton, Brimton Dever C, Easton Neston, Stratfield Say, Wentworth Woodhouse, Igtham Moat, Lights Carey, Newton Somerville, ox on hearth. Other manor houses. Several manor houses are commonly called without of suffix, by the name of the manor or estate alone. Bradninch, Cheddington, Cranbourne, Finchcox, Little Barford, Northborough, Cambridgeshire, Orchardley House, Stowhead, Sturminster Newton, Sulgrave, Theobalds, Ireland. Dunboy Castle is located on the Beara Peninsula in southwest Ireland. Ballylickey Manor House on Bantry Bay, Temple House, Balamote, County Sligo. Mount Juliet Estate Manor House, County Kilkenny. Temple House Manor, County Westmeath. Bunratty House, County Clare. Gorn Castle, Gorn, Co, Kilkenny. Northern Ireland Caladias Manor House Hotel, County Fermanagh. Richel Castle, County Armagh. Scotland Brodie Castle, Drum Castle, started as a 13th century tower house. Fowles Castle, Haddo House, House of Dun, Linger House, Monboddo House, Macknall's Castle, Rassy, Wales. Bodish Gorlan Hall near Conwy Castle. Gwydir Castle, Conwy Valley, North Wales. Webley Castle, Gower. Tretower Court near Crickhowell. Llansigvar near Abercynon and East Radminic. On the Iberian Peninsula, Spain. Casa Solariega is the catch-all name for manor houses in Spain. They were the places where heads of the noble families resided. Those houses receive a different name depending on the geographical region of Spain where they are located, the noble rank of the owner family, the size of the house and/or the use that the family gave to them. In Spain, a good many old manor houses, palaces, castles and grand homes have been converted into a type of hotel called parador, palacio. A palacio is a sumptuously decorated grand residence, especially a royal residence of the home of a head of state or some other high-ranking dignitary, such as a bishop or archbishop. The word itself is derived from the Latin name Palatium, for Palatine Hill, the hill which housed the imperial residences in Rome. Palace of Zizuela, Palace of Moncloa, Palacio del Marqués de dos Aguas, Palace of the Borges, Liria Palace, Palacio Real, the same as Palacio, but historically used by the Spanish royal family. Royal Palace of Madrid, Royal Palace of El Pardo, Royal Palace of Aranjuez, Royal Palace of La Granja de San Ildefonso, Royal Palaces of Rio Frio, Royal Palace of La Almudena, Palacio Arzobispal, the same as Palacio, but historically used by the ecclesiastic authorities. Palacio Arzobispal de Madrid, Palacio Arzobispal de Alcalá de Henares, Palacio Arzobispal de Toledo, Palacio Arzobispal de Sevilla, Palacio Arzobispal de Valencia. Palacete bejeweled and built house as a palace, but smaller. Palacete de Ayora, Palacete de las Mendoza, Palacete del Embarcadero, Alcázar. It is a type of Moorish castle, a fortified palace in Spain built during Muslim rule, although some founded by Christians. Mostly of the Alcázars were built between the 8th and 15th centuries. Many cities in Spain have its Alcázar. Palaces built in the Moorish style after the expulsion of the Moors from Spain are often referred to as Alcázars as well. Alcázar of Toledo, Alcázar of Seville, Alcázar de los Reyes Cristianos, Alcázar of Segovia. Hacienda landed estates of significance are located in the south of Spain. They were also very common in the former Spanish colonies. Some haciendas were plantations, mines or factories. Many haciendas combined these productive activities. They were developed as profit-making, economic enterprises linked to regional or international markets. The owner of an hacienda was termed an hacendado, a patron. The workforce on haciendas varied, depending on the type of hacienda and where it was located. Hacienda de los Príncipes, Casona, old manor houses in Leon, Asturias and Cantabria following the so-called Casa Montanesa architecture. Most of them were built in the 17th and 18th centuries. Typologically, they are halfway between rustic houses and palaces. Casona del Indiano, Quinta. It is a countryside house closer to the urban core. Initially, quinta designated the 1/5 part of the production that the lessee paid to the lessor, but later the term was applied to the whole property. This term is also very common in the former Spanish colonies. Quinta Verde, Tenerife. Alqueria in Al-Andalus made reference to small rural communities that were located near cities. Since the 15th century, it makes reference to a farmhouse with an agricultural farm, typical of Levante and the southeastern Spanish, mainly in Granada and Valencia. Alqueria del Moro. Pazo. A pazo is a type of grande old house found in Galicia. A pazo is usually located in the countryside and the former residence of an important nobleman or other important individual. They were of crucial importance to the rural and monastic communities around them. The pazo was a traditional architectural structure associated with a community and social network. It usually consisted of a main building surrounded by gardens, a dovecote, and outbuildings such as small chapels for religious celebrations. The word pazo is derived from the Latin palatio, Pazo de Meras, Pazo de Posaduro, Pazo de Alurazan. Caserio, also called Baserri, is the typical manor house of the Basque provinces. A Baserri represents the core unit of traditional Basque society, as the ancestral home of a family. Traditionally, the household is administered by the Echekawanda and the Echekajorn, each with distinctly defined rights, roles and responsibilities. When the couple reaches a certain age upon which they wish to retire, the Baserri is formally handed over to a child. Unusually, the parents were by tradition free to choose any child, male or female, firstborn or later born, to assume the role of Echekawanda or Echekajorn to ensure the child most suitable to the role would inherit the ancestral home. The Baserri under traditional law cannot be divided or inherited by more than one person. This is still the case in the southern Basque country, but the introduction of the Napoleonic Code in France, under which such practices are illegal, greatly upset this tradition in the north. Although the Basques in the north chose to be creative with the new laws, it overall resulted in the breakup and ultimate financial ruin of many Baserris. In practice, the tradition of not breaking up Baserris meant that the remaining children had to marry into another Baserri, stay on the family Baserri as unmarried employees, or make their own way in the world. Caserio Bengothax. Caserio Landecho Goico. Cortijo. A cortijo is a type of traditional rural habitat in the southern half of Spain, including all of Andalusia and parts of Extremadura and Castilla-La Mancha. Cortijos may have their origins in ancient Roman villas, for the word is derived from the Latin cohorticulum, a diminutive of cohors, meaning courtyard. They are often isolated structures associated with a large family farming or livestock operation in the vast and empty adjoining lands. It would usually include a large house, together with accessory buildings such as workers' quarters, sheds to house livestock, granaries, oil mills, barns, and often a wall enclosing a courtyard. The master of the cortijo or señorito would usually live with his family in a two-story building, while the accessory structures were for the laborers and the families, also known as cortijeros. Cortijo de Miraflores. Cortejo Jurado, Portugal. In Portugal, it was quite common during the 17th to early 20th centuries for the aristocracy to have country homes. These homes, known as solas, were found particularly in the northern, usually richer, Portugal, in the Barra, Minho, and Trás-os-Montes provinces. Many have been converted into a type of hotel called posada. Some famous quintas, pacos and solares: Sola de Almada de Deus, Sola de Mateus, Sola dos Matas, Quinta da Regaleira, Sola de Sezim. In Northern Europe, Denmark, Estonia. See List of palaces and manor houses in Estonia. Latvia. See List of palaces and manor houses in Latvia. Norway. Sweden. In Western Europe. France. In France, the terms château and manoir are often used synonymously to describe a French manor house. Maison forte is another French word to describe a strongly fortified manor house, which may include two sets of enclosing walls, drawbridges, and a ground floor hall. A salle basse that was used to receive peasants and commoners. The salle basse was also the location of the manor court, with the steward a seigneur's seating location often marked by the presence of a credence de justice, a wall carpet. The salle or upper hall, reserved for the seigneur and where he received his high-ranking guests, was often accessible by an external spiral staircase. It was commonly open up to the roof trusses, as in similar English homes. This larger and more finely decorated hall was usually located above the ground floor hall. The seigneur and his family's private chambers were often located off of the upper first floor hall, and invariably had their own fireplace and frequently a latrine. In addition to having both lower and upper halls, many French manor houses also had partly fortified gateways, watchtowers, and enclosing walls that were fitted with arrow gun loops for added protection. Some larger 16th-century manors, such as the Château de Courgine in Finistère, Brittany, were even outfitted with ditches and foreworks that included gun platforms for cannons. These defensive arrangements allowed maison fortes and rural manors to be safe from a coup de main perpetrated by an armed band, as there was so many during the troubled times of the 100 Years' War and the Wars of the Holy League, but it was difficult for them to resist a siege undertaken by a regular army equipped with engines. Netherlands. There are many historical manor houses throughout the Netherlands. Some have been converted into museums, hotels, conference centers, etc. Some are located on estates and in parks. Many of the earlier houses are the legacy of the feudal Heerlijkheid system. The Dutch had a manorial system centered on the local lord's domain. In Middle Dutch this was called the Vroonhof of Roenhof, a word derived from the Proto-Germanic word vrouwjas, meaning lord. This was also called a hof and the lord's house a hofstad. Other terms were used, including landhuis, a ridderhofstad, a stins estate, or a havesate. Some of these buildings were fortified. A number of castles associated with the nobility are found in the country. In Dutch, a building like this was called a kasteel, a slot, a burchtooiborg. During the Dutch Golden Age in the 17th century, merchants and regents looking for ways to spend the wealth bought country estates and built grand new homes, are often just for summer use. Some purchased existing manor houses and castles from the nobility. Some country houses were built on top of the ruins of earlier castles that had been destroyed during the Dutch Revolt. The owners, aspiring to noble status, adopted the name of the earlier castle. These country houses or stately homes were located close to the city in picturesque areas with a clean water source. Wealthy families sent their children to the country in the summer because of the putrid canals and diseases in the city. A few still exist, especially along the River Vecht, the River Amstel, the Spoorn in Kennemerland, and the River Veten in Wassenaar. Some are located near former lakes like the Wijkermeer, Watergraafmeer and the Beemster. In the 19th century, with improvements in water management, new regions came into fashion, such as the Utrecht Hill Ridge and the area around Arnhem. Today there is a tendency to group these grand buildings together in the category of castles. There are many castles and buitenplaatsen in all 12 provinces. A larger-than-average home is today called a villa or a herrenhuis, but despite the grand name, this is not the same as a manor house. A few of the more prominent Dutch manor houses are Weedorn, Sotheemstede,